All right, a look back on a very interesting week.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Hello there, friends. Nice to have you aboard this Friday evening. And if you know anything about this show, you know that we tape our Friday shows on Thursday mid-afternoon, so all heck can break loose. I will tell you, last week, was it last week, Anita, or was it the week before that I promised, or we bet that it would not, was it last week? Yeah, no. It was 2 weeks ago with the shutdown, right? Yeah. 2 weeks ago, you don't mind if I talk to Anita on the side, do you? 2 weeks ago with the shutdown, where Michael Kennedy, professor from Brown University, and I were all sorts of waxing on about how long the shutdown would be. We taped that show on Thursday. On Friday, the shutdown ended, and all we're doing on the Friday show is talking about the shutdown. That's what happens. You know, I joke about this because we're all about full transparency, but it doesn't mean the content's not important. And Friday shows are good because we get a chance to just kind of spread things out and not necessarily talk about the issues of the day. So, having said that, the State of the Union is the big conversation, and I've got a great professor from Providence College, and of course Joe Fleming has got to have a word in on this because there's a lot of polling response, which is really interesting to the State of the Union. Let's see a headline, and then we'll roll what we had on Wednesday, kind of a full review of what happened on Tuesday night.
President Trump urged Republicans and Democrats to come together during his second official State of the Union address.
Victory is not winning for our party. Victory is winning for our country.
The president discussed foreign policy matters like Venezuela and Syria during his address and announced plans for a two-day summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
Chairman Kim and I will meet again on February 27th and 28th in Vietnam.
With the threat of another government shutdown looming, Mr. Trump pressed for more funding for border security.
Simply put, walls work and walls save lives.
The president used his invited guests to highlight some of his biggest priorities, including immigration and criminal justice reform. Many Democrats in the chamber wore white in support of women, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who sat directly behind the president.
We also have more women serving in Congress than at any time before.
The president also made an apparent reference to the Russia investigation.
An economic miracle is taking place in the United States, and the only thing that can stop it are foolish wars, politics, or ridiculous partisan investigations.
And called on Congress to pass legislation to lower prescription drug prices.
Professor Adam Myers from Political Science Department at Providence College, and he needs no introduction, Joe Fleming, our pollster. Welcome, guys, both.
Thank you.
All right, rather than me having leading questions, your gut check executive summary on the State of the Union was what?
I thought he did a good job, all things considered. You know, he clearly prepared for it, which is something he doesn't often do. He's kind of an off-the-cuff guy, as we know. And I thought the speech was good. Will it change the equation in Washington, D.C. as far as the looming second government shutdown and his goals to build a wall? I think not. I think the equation remains the same.
I think anytime Donald Trump uses a prompter, it helps him greatly. And I think as a result of that, he had a good speech. The thing is, he talked about unity, and I think he made a strong case of unity, talked about areas where the Democrats and Republicans could work together. The question is that just Tuesday night, and by this weekend, it's all gone, and Donald Trump goes back to being Donald Trump? Or does he stay with this unity thing? And I mean, one way to do that is if the House and Senate come up with a compromise to avoid the next shutdown, and he accepts it. It shows he's trying to work with them. Okay. So we have to wait and see.
So the worst thing I can do here is invite these two brilliant men in, have them say something short, and then start pounding away at them, saying I disagree with them. Actually, Joe, I think you make. I think he gets very docile when he uses a prompter.
He does.
And I think that the change of his pace is obvious.
For sure.
So I'm not, if you're looking for him to be sedated, the prompter helps.
Right.
You think you don't think that, and again, these are aesthetics rather than substance, but you think that's to his advantage?
I think it was to his advantage on Tuesday night. The polling data that we've seen so far shows people like the speech, they like what they've heard. The question is, as I said, will he go back to the old Donald Trump? And I mean, already we've seen some tweets where it seems like he's starting to go back that way. You know, if he just accepts there's going to be investigations and he tries to want to work with the Democrats in some areas where they do agree, like infrastructure, he might get something done.
You're a pollster of extraordinary credibility. Do you really think a 72% number is real in the sense that they're asking people who saw it?
Exactly.
And those who decide to watch it generally
favor Donald Trump.
Right.
Right. So you're going to keep that in mind when you look at that polling data. If you asked a question in that poll, you know, who did you vote for in the 2016 election? My guess is the majority of them voted for Trump. So that's going to skew the results somewhat. And as we all know, Donald Trump supporters are very loyal to Donald Trump. No matter what he says, they're staying with him. So, I mean, I would, as I said, wait a week or two and see how his approval rating goes nationally when it's a regular poll, not just people who watch the speech.
But they always get a bump, right?
Yeah.
They always get a bump, but in today's news cycle, I think that the bump that presidents get from these things, you know, basically washes out within a day or two, and I think that's almost certainly happened in this case. I mean, we're not even talking about the State of the Union anymore, and you know, it occurred 2 days ago. And Joe's exactly right. I mean, I think the polls showed that the State of the Union audience was 17 percentage points more Republican than the general electorate was in 2016. That said, you know, a 72% approval rating for the speech suggests that there were a lot of folks who maybe are not Republicans or hardcore Trump supporters who thought he did a good job. But listen, by yesterday, we were already getting new headlines.
Yeah.
We were already talking about how the Democrats in Congress are pressing forward with all these investigations. Today, we're talking about the, you know, the barrage of tweets against congressional Democrats that Trump tweeted earlier this morning. So it's kind of already old news.
Yeah. So to answer this question for me, Professor. When you say you thought he made a good speech, is there a formula for a good State of the Union speech?
I think there's a formula for a good speech. As far as is there a formula for a good State of the Union speech? I don't know, because I don't think in general that they're all that important, to be perfectly honest with you. But a formula for a good speech from a president, yeah, I mean, I think a good speech is one that captivates a large swath of the American public, that moves the needle as far as presidential approval, and that gives the president more of a power to persuade Congress to do his bidding.
I was going to say one reason I think this was a good speech was because he talked about what people wanted to hear: unity, Democrats and Republicans working together. And he talked about that throughout the speech: infrastructure, AIDS, children cancer, prescription drugs, areas where we believe they can work together. So I think that helped people perceive this as a good speech. As we said, will this keep going? People are already forgetting the speech because in the news cycle, things change so quickly.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, the things that you point to are things that any, you know, they're almost not apolitical, but they're bipartisan in their nature anyway. Who's going to fight about and who's going to argue about funding for kids' cancer?
Right.
We should be doing more on that.
But, for example, infrastructure. The last 2 years, has anything been done with that? There's been a Republican Congress. No. So, I mean, now this is an area maybe the Democrats will want to get that going and will work with the president. It might be how they do it they disagree with.
Yet the overtone is shaded by his, I think, threat not to be cooperative over this investigation thing. I mean,
Right.
what was that supposed? Was that a unifying? He's never accepted the investigation as legitimate. We understand that, but to position it against more or less anything else getting done was perceived by some Democrats as a threat, and I can't argue that.
Listen, I mean, the speech had this kind of bizarre two-faced quality to it, because on the one hand,
right,
you know, he did have these notes of overtures of bipartisanship, which, you know, ring hollow to a lot of people who, you know, think about his long history of name calling and bickering with the Democrats. But then there were all these partisan, you know, softballs and in some cases hardballs, and clearly, you know, calling all of the investigations ridiculous was, you know, one of those partisan softballs. And he himself has said that, you know, he would interpret, you know, large-scale investigations by the Democrats in Congress as a quote-unquote warlike posture, and that's exactly what the Democrats responded to the State of the Union address with yesterday. I mean, you know, these efforts, you know, like the Judiciary Committee chairman is saying he's going to subpoena Whitaker, the acting Attorney General, and the Intelligence Committee is moving forward with their investigations into the Russia business, and so I see a warlike posture occurring on both sides.
And as far, I want to dig into that, and also the wall issue, which I think he resolved, and the Democrats don't see it. But the notion, the State of the Union is a big thing for a lot of people. It's funny, my daughter was talking to a friend of hers who, surprisingly, is not a young Trump voter, but loves the State of the Union. It was like, oh, I can't wait, State of the Union's done. Americans look forward to that speech, and there's some stuff built in culturally that make you like it no matter who it is, right? Excuse me.
That's true, and it could be a moment for national unification if presidents chose to really make their speeches kind of apolitical and apartisan. But I mean, I think it was John Roberts about 7-8 years ago, after one of Obama's really partisan State of the Union speeches, who pointed out that these speeches have kind of turned into partisan pep rallies. And he was wondering why the Supreme Court should even be there. I mean, the Supreme Court's supposed to be an apolitical institution, and they're just sitting in front of the
Well, it does
president.
show them to be disciplined.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the bigger the atmosphere and the USA chants, it's like, what on both sides. It's like, because anybody, at least the military and the Supreme Court showed decorum.
Right.
There's a sense of stability that image is there, right?
I think there's one thing in the speech, one line, I think that's, and you say about partisanship, and it was there.
Oh,
When
hold on a second, hold on. If there's one line, it's got to be good, and I got a break, so you have to wait. We're going to go to that one line and some more. Stay with us.
Bipartisanship could craft a 21st century immigration plan. But this administration chooses to cage children and tear families apart. Compassionate treatment at the border is not the same as open borders. President Reagan understood this. President Obama understood this. Americans understand this. And Democrats stand ready to effectively secure our ports and borders. But we must all embrace that from agriculture to healthcare to entrepreneurship, America is made stronger by the presence of immigrants, not walls.
Okay, so we'll get to Stacey Abrams' thoughts on that and the wall debate. But what was the one line?
The one line I really believe, which is going to be big in the 2020 election, was when Donald Trump talked about socialism. He's going to try to build the Democrats as socialists in the 2020 election, I believe. And if the Democrats nominate a real progressive, he might have some traction with that, and that may help him greatly. I think he started it off in the speech, and I think you're going to see the Republicans over this next year really push that issue against Democrats.
Yeah, this electorate is so, all due respect to you who watches the show, you're probably above the average Joe or Jane, right? But people's definitions of kinds of government forms, it has to be at an all-time low.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think most Americans have a good sense of what socialism actually means.
But Joe's probably got a point that there was a strategy there.
There was a strategy, and I think that strategy might pay off among older voters who grew up during the Cold War era, or came of age during the Cold War era, and for whom socialism is still like this incredibly bad thing. But among younger generations, I'm just not convinced that the word carries the same baggage. And actually, I think the polling bears this out. I think a large percentage of Democrats, or Democrats by a significant percentage, actually favor socialism as a general concept to capitalism. I mean,
but the
capitalism
base hates
is
it.
becoming a dirty word.
The
base hates it.
Right. And what's going to happen in these states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, where it's really close, the socialism may switch 40 or 50,000 votes, and you'll lose the state.
And so if this is a mobilization strategy, if it's a strategy to mobilize his base, it might be effective.
But here's the funny thing about it, and this is going to drive people crazy when I say this. I always get a handful of folks who think that I've been lobotomized over the years and that I've gone from what they perceive to be me as a conservative guy to a liberal guy, and that's just not the case. I've always seen things, I think, on a case-by-case basis, but I think one of the things that's is interesting to do is lay out like 10 issues from a socialist point of view and 10 from a conservative's point of view. You know, liberal will throw into the social, and you'll find everyday Americans have much more common ground on things that matter to them when you unlabel those things. And so, right?
Absolutely.
So the moniker is scary, but the reality.
This has been one of the great conundrums of political science, actually, why Americans seem to describe themselves as conservatives when on a wide variety of policy issues, right, if they're disentangled from the ideological labels, Americans actually oftentimes tend to give the liberal point of view on them.
Right to your point, Professor, I've got a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who a couple of months ago, over a couple of beers, was celebrating his new Medicare insurance.
Right.
And this guy is a Trumper,
Right.
MAGA hat, Obama, or Pelosi, and we're having a separate conversation. And he's all about the Medicare. He's like, you know what? I got with the insurance, it's like $250, and my prescription's on the boom. I got the B, it's easy. I put enough money. It's perfect. This thing is great. And I just looked at him and said, it's a socialist program.
Right.
He's like, oh yeah, whatever.
But that's
Let's talk about the Patriots.
Yeah.
Right?
That's precisely why the Trump phenomenon was so interesting, right, when it began in 2015, because he catapulted to the top of the Republican field as a very ideologically flexible guy. If you remember, back in the day, he wasn't always, issuing conservative policy prescriptions. He was talking about saving Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. And
all
Republican voters fell for all of it. And there have been studies that have shown that Republican voters, when they were exposed to Trump saying liberal ideas, they were more likely to kind of shift to being more liberal on those policies. And so it just goes to show that in many cases, Americans follow their leaders. They don't actually develop their policy views first and decide who they want their leaders to be on the basis of.
I was going to say, Trump keeps things very simple for the voters. And what he's going to do is say socialism is going to be more government oversight of every single thing you do. The Democrats are going to be socialist, and we're going to have so many government rules and regulations it's going to choke us to death and kill our economy.
Right.
That's going to be his message, I think, in 2020, depending on who the Democrats nominate.
Well, one of his big two messages, I think, was the wall, right, in Mexico. And so we went from Mexico paying for the wall and a concrete monstrosity that people perceived, at least in their minds, to be a 2,000-mile Great Wall of China type of thing. Mm-hmm. He, on the State of the Union address, made it very clear. It's a see-through steel barrier, and now you have to think, which will be strategically placed where expertise says it would be efficient. And the Democrats are still looking at this thing like, I can't believe that night and even through the week they haven't celebrated a victory, thanked the president for coming to their side, and wrapped this thing up. What is going on?
Good.
Right?
I don't actually know. I mean, I think.
Don't you think they should?
They should. And I think, you know what? I generally don't do this, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a prediction. I think that these congressional negotiators right now that are trying to come up with a deal to keep the government open past next Friday, they're going to come up with something that is going to involve some very minimal border wall type thing.
Has to.
That McConnell is going to get behind, Pelosi is going to get behind, Trump is going to be boxed into a corner, and he's going to agree to it.
They're going to call them barriers, and they're going to call them strategically placed barriers, and I think he gave it to them.
He did, and I think that's why the Democrats aren't saying anything. Right. Because they're going to let the conference committee come up with it. Instead of Democrats saying, Trump conceded, let the conference committee come up, and Pelosi and Schumer will say, we'll accept this.
But Schumer, day after, saying, listen, we'll work it out as long as the president keeps his mouth shut and stays in the office. Why go that route? Why not just thank him for agreeing to the principles and giving up most of his false promises in the campaign and be done with it? It's amazing to me.
Well, they're going to. As soon as they come up with the conference report that shows...
They're going to thank him?
They'll basically say, here's what you got to do. He'll accept
Democratic leaders do themselves no favors by being anything other than oppositional to Trump.
Agreed.
So that's why they're not doing that.
But again, it's playing to the base.
That's
the
true.
Democrats are playing to the base. Trump plays to the base.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You know what Trump does as well as anything in the world? Claiming victory where victory doesn't exist.
Right.
True.
The Democrats actually have one, and they can't figure out they got to claim one.
Too, yeah.
Yeah, when we come back, we'll talk about Virginia, which is what? Stay with us. Now, this is the one place that I'm high risk here because it's Thursday afternoon as we tape our Friday show, which is our normal production schedule. Something may have happened on Friday because Fridays are always the dump news day, right? Maybe the governor of Virginia goes bye-bye by tomorrow, but you know, we'll deal with it in our own real time. This photo is despicable. Joe, talk about, as a guy who's a pollster and an advisor, talk about not having your act together. Last Friday, it comes up. He's like, okay, let me tape an apology. Let me make a statement. And then by the next morning, he's like, you know what? I don't think it's me. Who doesn't his advisor say, all right, God, before we do anything,
Right.
Is that you?
Right. Dan, there's no question. I mean, he had to sit down with his staff and decide what's going on here and what's the best course of action. You don't change it
You're
overnight.
dumb and dumber.
No, you look very bad.
Well,
in
he
the
finally,
situation.
by yesterday, hired a PR firm, a crisis management team, to try to figure this whole thing out. What's your take on this?
Clearly, he made a series of bad moves between Thursday and Saturday of last week, and I can't explain what was going through his mind or his advisor's minds. But it seems like he's and I could be wrong again. By tomorrow, we might know this is totally different, but it seems like he's weathering the storm. He's resisting calls to resign. He's hired this PR firm, the African American.
Well, he's been bullied by the fact that his AG now says, "Oh, me too," with the blackface, and in the between, you got the LG, who's got himself in an alleged sex scandal.
And if all three of them go, then the new governor of Virginia will be a Republican, the Speaker of the House of Delegates there, which is something that I think the Democrats, who as of 2 weeks ago thought they were on the cusp of complete domination of Virginia government in perpetuity, really don't want to have.
You think about this, I said during the break, there's about 70 years of cumulative former behavior between the three of them that have them all jammed up. Look at what a time we live in. Isn't it strange?
Society changes. Social media makes a big impact on what happens nowadays.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right. Yeah, I mean, these days, I think if you're a wannabe politician, right, if you're, my age or younger and you're thinking about running for office, you need to think about your entire history going back to your college days and even earlier. I mean, because it does appear that, incidents from, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago can disqualify you. And these are, some very abhorrent incidents. But one thing that really surprised me in watching all of this was just how quickly this turned into a national political issue. I mean, within one day, all of the Democratic presidential aspirants were issuing calls on Northam to resign, and this is a Virginia issue.
It's Trumpian pressure.
Yeah.
We only had 30 seconds, but it's Trumpian pressure. They need to look reactive.
Exactly.
Right.
They can't wait. If they waited 3 or 4 days, it would look bad on the Democrats.
Hypocrisy,
They had to move
hypocrisy,
quick.
hypocrisy.
Exactly.
He has an impact on all things, even when he's not
No
even
question.
involved. All right, guys, thank you for your expertise. I appreciate that. It was a good speech, says the professor. Okay, I'll score it that way. We'll be right back. Final word. The professor made an important point. He's in front of kids, young adults, college students every single day. It's probably smart to remind them and even everybody watching the show right now, be careful what you do today because it could certainly impact you down the line. And that which maybe 15 years ago you would say, yeah, I had this little thing I did, may not be even as problematic. I mean, it's all different. And things that you may even not even think about become problems. So, I don't know. Contemplate that over your weekend. Have a good one, and I'll see you on Monday. Good night.